Oh my goodness, everyone. You are in for a treat. This is such a special episode with one of my mentors, someone who I respect so much. On this episode of Parenting and You with me, Dr. Shefali, I'm so excited to have Dr. Ramani, the most amazing author of the book, It's Not You, the pioneer of all this amazing work on narcissism. You all know her already. She is a clinical psychologist, New York Times bestselling author, and a mother of two daughters. She's going to talk about her own mothering journey and her journey as a woman from the Indian culture and all the pathways she has gone through to reach where she has today. So this is going to be an amazing conversation. I am thrilled, honored, so excited that I'm being joined by the most influential clinical psychologist out there right now, Dr. Ramani. Dr. Ramani is a mother of two daughters. We're going to talk about her mothering journey. She's also, I'm sure all of you already know, the New York Times bestselling author of the phenomenal book called It's Not You, which helps us identify and heal from narcissistic people. Dr. Ramani, it's an honor to have you on my podcast. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shefali. It's so nice to see you again.
Thank you. So both of us are raised in an Indian culture. So let's start there. What were some of the messages you received as a young girl that were both empowering and stood in your way?
I think that, it's interesting. I had the experience of being not just raised in Indian culture, but in the United States, right? We weren't living in India. My parents had immigrated recently before my father, before my mother, and then my mother, and then they were married. And I was born. They were married before she immigrated. And so I was also dealing with that kind of growing up. And, it was the 1960s. So in fact, the year I was born was when the Immigration and Naturalization Act was passed in the United States. So actually people from India could actually stay longer than a student visa or something like that. And I was born in the States. And so I had a American citizenship. So what was it like? I mean, what were the messages? They were complicated. They were very complicated messages. It's a very patriarchal culture. And I was a daughter. And in Indian families, the thing they want more than anything at the time I was growing up was their first child to be a son. And a child being a daughter was a massive disappointment. And not for my mother, but I think in the family system at large. And my mother actually, only now that I'm almost 60 years old, she wouldn't have never told me this as a child, but now that I'm fully grown, she has told me that, when she was so young at the time too, and shows up with this daughter who she adored and was really criticized, made fun of, mocked, made to cry for having a daughter. So I'm enough of a psychologist to know that somehow gets internalized, that the message early on was you are somehow lacking because you didn't deliver, especially as the eldest child, on this whole gender thing. That was number one. And there were also very discordant gender roles. And again, what gets tricky, Dr. Shefali, is you had two things going on. It was a different time historically in the United States. The opportunities women have now were very, very different than the opportunities women would have had then. And on top of that, the way in terms of issues like race and language and all of that would have featured, that was all going to be an issue. But there was definitely this sense, and the cultural things I was raised with is that in a marriage, it was that the husband is almost supposed to be worshipped as something next to a holy person, like a deity. And so I saw this sort of worshipful nonsense, which has actually turned me off to marriage my whole life. Even though I've been married, I've been divorced. So, if it was an arranged marriage, all of that. So all the things we learn about in the United States about love, and I would see kids' parents like kissing each other. I'm like, what the heck is that? So there was that piece of it. I do know I was loved that way. I can say I'm very, very, very securely attached to my mother. So, thank heaven for that. She was a very young mother, absolutely magnificent mother, loving mother. I can't imagine what it would have been like to be as young as her, have a new baby, try to figure out this country where you don't have a car, but also still have to please a kind of unpleasable husband. So I'm sure, again, from what we understand about how kids internalize what's happening, I'm sure I experienced some of that struggle and sadness she had, but she was a very, very loving mother. And I think what I learned, and I have to say, this is probably one of the hardest things that I learned, was that I felt a tremendous obligation from as far back as I have intellectual memory of any kind. I have felt a tremendously strong obligation that You've been given every opportunity that not one ancestor woman in your life has been given. So you don't get to slack. You don't skip higher education. You will work every day of your damn life. And so that was the message, that I have been given a voice that nobody else that came before me, certainly not my mother, her mother, and so on and so forth on either side of the family, was ever given. And I think to this day, it's an obligation I carry heavily. It's almost in a hurtful way because I don't give myself a moment down. And so I felt a tremendous responsibility to do that, to honor all the sacrifice. She'd gotten into medical school. She wasn't allowed to go into medical school because she had to get married. So I learned that marriage meant you had to give yourself up. These patriarchal structures meant you had to give everything up. So it was a call to action. So putting my head down, being a good girl, being a really good student, being ambitious. Again, I'm pushing 60 years old and I still retain that. And I feel like if I were to step down from this, I still feel it would be irresponsible. So that was also a burden, to really, really carry. In essence, it wasn't that I was told I was great. I, at a very young age, realized like I've been given something that nobody else was given in my family. So don't you dare take this for granted. And as a daughter, like I said, I wasn't told I was great. I was watching my male cousins be told they were fantastic and couldn't do anything wrong. And I was kind of like, back shelved and sort of nobody's going to care about a daughter. The other message I got was a really interesting one was that, well, daughters are no good because they don't take care of their parents. The understanding would be that they would take care of their in laws. Well, that's not the culture we came in. Actually, I ended up marrying a white American person. I didn't even marry an Indian person. Didn't work out, but now I'm incredibly focused. I'm one of my biggest roles in my life is to care for my parents. So it's like every single stereotype, every single belief got exploded, but it was a very complicated way to grow up. And so the messages were very mixed. And as part of an immigrant family, I think immigrants carried two burdens, one of maybe some cultural pride, but at the same time, cultural silencing. And so I would get this mixed message of India's great. No, India's terrible. No, India's great. No, India's terrible. So I'm Indian. So was I great? Was I terrible? So it really created almost this very fragmented internal sense. So all those messages kind of came and in our family, men and women socialize separately. So I'd remember that kind of like when women would socialize, there was a lot of laughter and joy. And when men, it was dull and gray. And so, but the women, their personas came out when the men weren't present. So it really gave me some really messed up models of gender roles. I'm going to own that. But, and we recently had a family party and somebody was visiting and said, it's so fascinating. Like the women they were having a time, but there were really no men brought into that space. So all of these things carried with me. And obviously I grew up a very acculturated life here in the States, but those messages definitely have been etched in me. But it's basically the one, you don't get to fail because too many people gave up too much stuff for you to be right now sitting with you on a podcast.
Right. But you, and like you said, it's a double-edged sword. So on many levels, you have embodied that. You have turned it into service. Look what you've done for people. You've helped so many of us women, especially through your hard drive, hard push, hard accomplishments. But talk to us about, as a woman and a mother, and now this fantastic career, how do you give yourself the permission now? Because I do see you working round the clock. I don't know whether you've ever given yourself slack, but I saw you through your promotion of your book. You've been tireless. You don't stop. I mean, I see you everywhere.
It's so interesting you bring up this question, Dr. Shefali, because in a way, it almost veers away from, it kind of, it's never going to fully veer away from my Indianness and my culture. But, life took the turns it took and they weren't always easy. And like I said, I did get divorced, which brought a lot of shame into my family. It was horrific shame for particularly my mother, for the whole family, people looking at me sideways. There was a real kind of ick kind of attributed to me. In the long run, my ex-husband remains a friend. We co-parent really, I think, very well. We didn't always get it right, but I don't know that any parent ever gets it right. I respect who he is as a person. I got married because also, I was in a relationship, loved and cared about the person, but I also, because the message I got growing up as a woman is Indian daughters get married. It's a very big generational shift, though, Dr. Shefali. I have so many women cousins who are not getting married. I almost got married in a way, in some ways, it's just sort of like, okay, let's just chill this out. Again, I grew up with really skewed models and all of that.
Yeah.
I'm so grateful I did. It was an important part of my journey. Our kids are wonderful, all the things, right?
Yes.
So everything happens in life for a reason. But to your point, I think this is the immigrant's burden, right? You can never do enough. You can never work hard enough. You have to earn your place at the table times 10. And I definitely felt that. Like I don't belong in this table. I don't belong in this room. I don't belong in this podcast. I don't get to write a book. Like everything is an experiment in imposter syndrome. And so we get into an interesting space where, again, culture overlaps with even what we understand about trauma, which is how much are some of what seem like our adaptive behaviors actually really trauma responses? And I think overwork is a place of dissociation, it's numbing, it's all this other stuff that is virtuous. Oh, look at Dr. Ramani, she works so hard, right? But honestly, if somebody gave me, I don't know, the amount of resource I need to make sure I could care for my parents. It all comes back to that. Can I care for my parents? Can I care for my children? Can I be the good Indian daughter who cares for everyone? If I had enough resource to do that, honey, I'd put my feet up for 6 months. I'd watch movies and I'd actually start exercising and I would do all, like, I know what I want my life to look like. I love a lot about my life, but I don't care for myself. And I think because some of my success came so late, I was over 50. I was struggling till I was about 52, 53, and then only then did this conversation about narcissism get any traction. It came so late. So in a way, I feel as though I got to the party late, so I'm trying to, kind of make up time. But I also feel this tremendous sense of responsibility to everyone I care for. So no, I don't care for myself. And to another point, culturally, I did not have great models of what looked like female self-care, women's self-care when I was growing up. Again, in the immigrant wave, my parents came in to the United States. They really came with not much, even though there was resource in India, it didn't transfer well. And so we lived in a very small 2-room apartment when I was born, and there wasn't resource. So there was not like this idea of leisure time. The United States was a different country then too. Even the way people take vacations now, there
Right.
was no equivalent to that in the
Right.
1970s. Like I look at vacations, I'm like, oh my God, like the richest family in town wouldn't have taken the vacation that the most ordinary people take now. So it's a very different world. But so I didn't have a mother who got her nails done or her hair done. She sewed my clothes. You know what I'm saying? So I did not ever see that woman put her feet up once. From when I got up in the morning till when I went to sleep as a child, that woman was cleaning, organizing, cooking. I mean, all of it. So I don't have a model and to me, when I do that, I feel guilty. Like, well, she didn't do it. So I shouldn't be doing this. And so there's no model. And I don't remember, I mean, maybe with my grandmother, it would have been she was sitting and talking with friends, but and there's more help in India. Like there's someone to clean and cook and wash the dishes and all that other stuff. I don't have a model for it. And I actually think a terrible thing, and I think it's a terrible thing I've done to my own daughters, is when we don't give our children models of self-care. Like my kids don't really, I mean, they're shocked if they were to come in the house and see me sitting and reading a book that's not for work. They'd be like, what are you doing? Wait, you're going to watch TV? It's that. So it's a very complicated, multi-branched tree for me. But no, I don't. I don't care for myself. And I mean, it may come back to bite me, but we'll see what happens.
Do you think that at some point you could give yourself the gift of breaking that pattern?
I don't know, Dr. Shefali. I mean, it's an interesting question, right? There's probably some corners of that conversation I can't fully get into in a public forum. I hope so. I hope so. My life is cut up into a lot of pieces too. The people I care for are kind of all over the country. And so I'm always on an airplane and that kind of thing. I do it in tiny pockets, because I travel so much to work and lecture, is that I don't know, I might check out the hotel's pool for half an hour, or if it's in a nice place, I might, I tacked on a day to a business trip that I have in May. So I can, and took the day off so I can sit by the swimming pool. It might look like that. Will there be a time? There will be a time probably as the kids get older, as my roles shift to where my parents are. And sadly, when my parents pass, a time will feel like something different. As I get older, as I feel more financially secure in a way. I mean, I think those are the things but I need to feel safe before I'll put my feet up. That I know.
Yeah, yeah. I just want to reflect to you that, there's some people who give, but then there's some people like you. I'm just saying you give at 1,000, and I don't know, you obviously don't realize it because you're just being you, but I see you just consistently just giving 1,000, 1,000, 1,000. And I just see so much reflection of our Indianness in that girl who just feels like she has to prove it and show up and is such a loving heart that it's such a deadly combo, right? That loving heart with the good girl, it's like you have no escape from your own self. and you're so competent and you're so brilliant. It seems to come so naturally, but the level of output is so vastly different. So I just know that you are, burning it at every end. And hopefully you will one day realize that you are so enough. The most powerful thing I heard you say, besides all your work, which is incredible, I loved what he said. I think it was on Lewis's podcast, and his mouth fell open. You said something about, nope, I don't believe we need to forgive everyone. Do you remember that?
Yeah, no.
Talk about that, because that's radical.
It is radical. And I think that it's a very uncomfortable, again, culture that we're from. If you want to even bring it back to that, that's unheard of in Indian culture. Some real horrifying things have happened in Indian families. And the sense is they're your elders, you forgive. We are family, you forgive. There's a lot of closing ranks. I think that the issue becomes, because of my focus, which is on antagonistic, narcissistic, manipulative, harmful, emotionally abusive relationships. Sadly, people who can engage in that, if you forgive them, they receive that as, in essence, permission signing off and emboldening their behavior. Oh, great. Well, that's good to know. And they'll keep doing it. And they'll keep using the forgiveness as a weapon. And what I tell people is that forgiveness is an internal process. This isn't something you have to broadcast to the world. The biggest mistake anyone could make is to walk around saying, I don't forgive them, right? Because then that honestly puts a terrible light on the person who's not forgiving and who may have very valid reasons to forgive. And in fact, Dr. Shefali, there's a whole body of research that shows that if people repeatedly forgive people who are repeat transgressors, who've harmed and hurt and betrayed them multiple times, it's actually bad for the forgiver. Although there's a lot of research talking about how great forgiveness is, there's also research showing that it's not. And I think that the reluctance of the field of mental health, psychology, psychiatry to step up and say this isn't always good for people speaks to the patriarchy in the field, which is a conversation for another day. But I don't believe it's always good for people. And in my work, a lot of people said they felt set free when they realized that not forgiving doesn't make you a bad person. It doesn't mean you're holding a grudge. It doesn't mean you can't let go of stuff. It means that you actually realistically may be appraising what this situation is, or if this was a significantly impactful relationship, a parental relationship that affected you developmentally, a long-term intimate relationship that might have also by extension affected the children you have with this person. In those kinds of relationships, depending on the betrayals and whatever, it may feel unforgivable. People may say the course of my life was changed by this. I suffered tremendous distress. People might have complex trauma. Their trust might have been betrayed in fundamental ways. They may have not been protected. And when I work with clients on that, I'm like, how do you forgive that? And they're like, I don't know. I'm not doing a good job. And I'm like, you're doing a damn good job, right? But forgiveness is also not lip service. Like, I forgive. There really, truly has to be an internal accompaniment of a letting go of resentment. And it's okay if you don't let go of resentment, because as far as I'm concerned, that psychological state, you're like, this person's still harmful. Like, I'm going to resent them because I'm still unsafe with them. How
Yeah.
do you forgive that? And so I think that forgiveness is often used as a way to silence dissent. And I have a real problem with that, because that dissent is where a person is able to create a coherent narrative about the harm they experienced. People, after they develop that coherent narrative, can say, you know what? My mother's a dangerous person, or my cousin's a dangerous person, or my ex is a dangerous person. They're not good to me. I didn't deserve this. It was an unhealthy relationship. Their behavior is unacceptable. Sometimes people say, you know what? I'm never going to have anything to do with them again, or I forgive them, or I kind of forgive them now that I know what their backstory is, but you can't get there until you do your healing and get coherence. And you know what? Some people never get there and they heal just fine. And so I think that there's such pressure to forgive, but like I said, it's a silencing of dissent, and it is shutting down the process of processing the emotions that a person, oh, just forgive them, just forgive them. And I think people take that as license to say, well, then I shouldn't be angry and then I shouldn't be hurt. No. And so it's complicated. It's very complicated, but more often than not, at least in the world I'm in, people get pressured to forgive and they're not ready, and maybe they'll never be ready.
Yeah, that was so liberating for me, because I think there's so much pressure really in our culture, in the world, to bubble wrap, to put a bow on top of every process. Like, every goal of every relationship has to be a good ending, a
Right.
peaceful ending, because people are afraid by the brutality of the isness of disharmony. It's okay sometimes to stay in disharmony. It's never okay to harm someone. It's never okay. You're not talking about harming anyone or being violent, but it's okay to have friction and sit in that. And I think the Western world, especially, and India apes that in some ways, is to bubble wrap everything and put a bow on it. But then you bypass the discernment of the brutality of relationships sometimes. Sometimes people's consciousness requires a brutal reckoning. And we need to be able to say, no, this is not okay. It'll never be okay. I need to just be in this for this moment in time.
And that's hard. That's a tough sell, especially culturally. I mean, I think that there are some cultures that not only are patriarchal, but also veer, you know, collectivistic or even appearance oriented cultures, right? The way this family looks to the world is more important than how this family functions.
Yeah.
And that narrative structure for a family is where you'll see a lot of that forgiveness pressure, and again, like you said, the bubble wrap, the gift wrap, the bow on top, look how wonderful we look. It misses that point of acknowledging that this is not okay. And just that simple recognition, sometimes it can't be fixed. There can't be the divorce. There can't be the no longer speaking to the family member. Again, culturally, that's very pronounced. But the sense that that was not okay. The way they behaved was not okay. Giving someone that validation that they can use that languaging actually sometimes is how they're able to keep interacting with the person, even if it's superficially at a family function or something, versus having to do that performance. The performance is what leads to the death of a soul.
Yes. Even Buddhism and spirituality sometimes gets confused as we should give everyone a pass and understand everybody's childhood, psychologists especially. We should just understand and forgive. And while that is benevolent and beautiful in many ways, like you said, it's very empowering to say, yes, I understand, and it's not okay.
Correct. That's right.
And that took me a long time with all the narcissistic relationships in my life because I kept understanding people's childhoods, that I would allow bad behavior. And it took a long time for me to disentangle. Oh, I can really be understanding and compassionate, but I can also say, this is intolerable, it's inappropriate, not allowed. And the behavior can be separate from the childhood experience,
And all of that is obviously breaking through the trauma dialectic, right? The trauma, kind of dichotomizes us, it splits us, it fragments us, and it makes a lot of black and white. And that middle path, that gray, that where the use of the word and instead of the word but.
Yes.
And that recognizing that there can be compassion for the history, but no tolerance for the ongoing behavior. It is a tough sell. I don't care what culture you're in. People want tidier answers. I think that especially when it comes to things like love and relationships, we still approach them from a very childlike place, right? We want to be loved. We want to attach. We want to be cared for, cherished, protected. And a lot of that didn't happen for a lot of people in childhood. So this idea of like, I want them to be good. And I've said, well, listen, you're trying to attach to a very jagged object, and that there's elements of this person you have empathy for. There's even elements of this person you enjoy, but there's also a lot of this person you don't feel safe with. And I think internalizing it in the person saying, you just don't feel safe with them. This doesn't have to be even an indictment of their behavior. This behavior is problematic, which is why you don't feel safe. But that bringing it back to that fundamental idea can sometimes be like, yeah, I don't feel safe. I don't feel myself. And when you can't be yourself, you're not safe.
Right. But in India especially, but other cultures too, we were taught that is not a good enough reason
No.
to not be with someone. Oh, you don't feel safe, right? That's not enough because everyone's not feeling safe with everyone. You have to be an axe murderer, be brutally attacked, be
Right.
physically abused. He should be a drunk and an alcoholic. And then you have a legitimate reason to leave a marriage or a relationship. So women especially have been given that narrative that you can't just leave. What is just feeling safe? Find a way to survive. And what a terrible model.
It's a terrible model. And it has done so much harm. I know can say that to me personally, is that an intimate relationship is the subjugation of the self. That's really the message.
Dr. Ramani, thank you so much for your honesty, your vulnerability, your openness. Let's take a quick break and return very soon. So talk about the shame, because so many women who are struggling in their marriages don't leave or don't find other options because of the shame of this perception of failure, because marriage has been so pedestalized, sanctified, and sold as the ultimate goal for a woman to keep her family together. Then when that falls apart or crumbles,
Mhm.
she's burdened by this tremendous, sense of failure, unworthiness, and shame. You've been through a divorce, I've been through a divorce. How did you go through it with any sense of empowerment? Where did you find that empowerment from? And what would you say to women going through it today?
I think it's a tough call, because I think that what we got to remember, and I always preface everything I say in this space, which is not everyone can leave. And for all the reasons people can't leave, right? Financial, cultural, they really will be cast out in a permanent way from a family. They left the workplace. They don't have a steady source of their own income. Safety concerns are very real. If the relationship is narcissistic or emotionally abusive or physically abusive enough, the likelihood of harm escalating goes up if a person leaves. So it's not always the path, but when people do opt for that path, say I can do this, and I feel like I'm able to do this. I don't know. I mean, I think Dr. Shefali is that I growing up in the culture I did, I think I saw no marriages I admired, not one. The only marriages I admire are of people my peers I've had, and but not one. Maybe here and there. I mean, I don't know that I admire it. I think the one person, I think because the man was gentle and the image of a gentle man is not as much of something I'd see in the culture. And so the man in that marriage was gentle, but the wife was very demanding and not very nice. So it's like it's almost like every relationship had to have someone who wasn't very nice. And so I guess for lack of a better way, I didn't see the point. And I guess because I remember the way I had to grow up was I had to watch parents in a not healthy relationship to this day. And it didn't do me any favors because I ended up blaming myself a lot. I exhausted myself as a child, basically trying to be a peacekeeper and a diplomat and try to keep everyone like I was almost like a rodeo clown. Like I was constantly, how do I make sure everyone's okay? And how do I monitor the energy? And how do I make sure my parents don't fight? How do I protect my sister? And so I think it's like I thought I didn't want my kids to have that. And I look back and I have a tremendous amount of regret. I didn't do my kids any favors by getting divorced. That was very hard for them, splitting their time between multiple households, between mine and his, having to worry about us. It took a tremendous toll on them. If somebody said to me at the end of my life, what will my regret be? My regret will be that I didn't spend enough time with my kids when it mattered and that I broke their world up. And that will be my regret. Had I not gotten divorced, my regret would have been I didn't give them a great model of marriage. So I was doomed. I was doomed, and I recognized that I was doomed. I know I wouldn't have taken the turns in my career I did, done the work I did. Probably not. If I'd stayed in that relational situation, life would have taken different turns. And so there was shame because the shame was literally said that people have said to me in as many words, you should be ashamed. So it's not like it was internal shame. It was like, you should be ashamed. Many people ended contact with me for some period of time. And then it worked its way out and we got back in contact again. And so their big concern was you're screwing up your kids. My kids are great, so they're not, what I don't know. I mean, I think whatever path they took, all kids, if you want to make that argument, all kids struggle with something, right? And you're going to be, dooming yourself to a life that's a mess. And it is, I don't know. I feel pretty well in hand in my life. I work all the time, but I think that's probably my greatest sin, is that I do work too much. But I can't even say it was internal shame, so much external shame.
Right.
That I will tell you this, though, Dr. Shefali, it's probably a bigger disclosure that I should make, but I feel a poignant, yearning sense of envy when I look at people who got married, had their kids, and stayed married, and the kind of peace that those kids get to settle, like people who have long-term, truly happy marriages, like that they're friends with their partner and there's respect and there's joy and there's support, and they had kids together and their kids got to experience that close-knit, loving family. What's interesting is my kids, if I'm with my ex and we're together, we're all laughing. We're all having a wonderful time. I enjoy that. So it's not as though they're viewing this hostility between us. Not at all. And I love my ex-husband's partner so much. And so there's a lot of great things we've made work. And maybe they've learned that human relationships aren't just one way. That had to be a win. And I've even said to them in as many words, if your father ever got sick, you don't have to worry. I will step in. He will never, even if he wasn't in a relationship, I would care for him. That's my responsibility because he's your father and you're my children. So we've had those conversations. And so, but I do envy that. I envy people who have that, that kind of that tight family zone. And, everyone's got a different story.
That's so honest and vulnerable of you to say that longing, probably for your little girl self also. And, there's this fantasy that we all want to give our children the utopic ideal. And what a shattering thing it is, especially for us mothers, when we feel we haven't given that.
Yeah.
And we have to find a way to alchemize that. The way I've done it in my life is because of the work we do and having privy to so many family situations. I see truly, and I'm not saying this as a sour grapes kind of reframe, that every family has its own burdens, you know.
Oh, heck yeah. That's true. It's true. It's true.
And I'm not saying this because, that makes me feel better. It's just really the truth, you know? And so we take whatever the best we have in this life, in this one life. But, marriage and that family system has been so sold and marketed as the ideal. Now, of course, families that do manage to be healthy and happy are always going to have a little bit of a trump card. But I think that there's so many paths to getting there, and you know that as well. And you work with really difficult clients. Let's move a little bit to your kids. And how do you feel your culture, your generational patterns kind of showed up in your parenting? And what were some things that you couldn't help? It just got passed on. And maybe one or two patterns you consciously broke or tried to break, if you could just illuminate that.
I think the hardest thing is that, and I think this is pretty universal in immigrant cultures, I think it's really magnified in Indian immigrant cultures, is we're sort of obsessed with education. And I get the obsession because it's the path, it's the only path, right? Maybe that's shifting a little bit. We're seeing more entrepreneurship and also we're seeing more intergenerational transmission of wealth, but it's education what is the path forward, particularly for women, was for me. And so I pushed that, I wanted my kids, and they're bright girls and all of that. But I have to say that you kind of got caught in the whole, like, no, really, it wasn't even like I cared that they went to some, Ivy League, this, that, and the other. It's more of a, you got to hang in there in school. Part of that, I think, was very much culture unconsciously coming through me. Part of it was the safety behavior, like the sense of, I just want them to always have something in their back pocket that would make them employable and all of that. It's that there's that fear. There's that fear when you, again, especially when you come from the instability that comes from being from an immigrant family and the money around that. I myself was financially unstable for a long time in my adulthood life. So I think there's that protection piece. And I also think that another cultural piece that I carried with me, and maybe it's not just cultural, I think part of it is who I am, is I would try to fix instead of be. That, again, another regret I'm going to take to my grave is that too many times with my children, I wanted to fix things. How can we fix this? How can we make this better? What can I do? Rather than doing the much heavier lift and the uncomfortable lift of sitting with their pain, sitting with the tears, recognizing it can't be fixed. It's okay. My kids have even said to me, they said, probably the worst thing you ever did to us was tell us, like, we're smart and we can succeed and look how great you are. They're like, in a way, you had so much belief in us that it kind of set us up that when stuff got harder for us to do, we really doubted ourselves. And they nailed what we know is that when we do kind of, you extol you're so smart, you're so great, look at this thing you did. We actually start planting the potential seed of a tree of the imposter syndrome. Because at some point, we're all going to stumble. The irony is I got to the imposter syndrome through, apparently there's like 27 highways that drive into this place called the imposter syndrome.
Right.
So I think that for them, then it's like, well, why is this so hard? And that should be easier for me. So I think that there was some of that, but I do think that those are some of the cultural patterns of like, you got to do the thing and we got to fix the thing. To this day, I had a conversation with my mother yesterday and she's like, well, just don't feel that. I'm like, Mom, that's not how it works. We don't just not feel things. It's like telling me, just don't be hungry. Like, this is a natural thing coming through me.
Right.
She still doesn't get it. She's like, I'm never going to get this. So let it go. And she's an angel. And I'm like, okay, fine. I'm not having this conversation. My sister rolling her eyes on the FaceTime and that's the end of it. But I do sometimes get sad. I'm like, ooh, this is how she was when I was a kid too. So there's no wonder that, the fixer, solver, that's the role I had in my family. That's what Indian families do. How can we fix this? Do you want something to eat? They're crying and they're depressed and you're offering them food. I'm not sure, but it's always like, what is wrong? Why is she crying? We need to give her some food. I'm like, no, food is the last thing she needs right now. But that's the fix. Like, can I make you something to eat? I've done that. Even my daughters are smart enough now. They're like, did I say I wanted something? Did I ask for food? Like, listen to us. And so that not listening part of me is a great regret. I've gotten better, but still sometimes, I mean, I failed actually 20 minutes before our podcast. I failed with my daughter and she just called me and about something else, like unrelated. And I literally vomited on her my entire schedule for the next 2 days. And she's like, actually, mom, I just called to see if you wanted to spend a little time together, but I'm guessing no. And that was such a fail. Like she didn't need to hear my schedule for the next 2 days. So that kind of coming out of me, I was not being mindful. I was trying to get things done. And my kids say that to me all the time. You're so focused on getting things done that you don't actually catch what we actually need.
Yeah.
Those are all my Indian things coming through.
I know, but there are very few parents who would be so open and so honest. And I can tell you that as much as you're making mistakes, the fact that you're so transparent and you really are, you're so easy to talk to. You have this way about you that I don't care how distracted you think you are. You also have a very open, direct, honest, like you're not here to impress anyone.
No, that ship has sailed.
But that is the most endearing thing. You're not trying to be the superwoman, even though you are a superwoman, you really are. But your honesty is just so refreshing. You have no defense in terms of a fake, inauthentic ego about you. You just look at how much you've shared. I mean, I'm so grateful. And people listening to you will be like, oh, wow, if Dr. Ramani can be so vulnerable and make mistakes, I'm not such a bad parent now. You're giving permission for other people to embrace their jagged edges. And that is very unique to you.
No, I appreciate that. No, I sometimes if I could have gotten a parenting do-over, if at my age I could have parented my kids knowing all I know, it would have actually looked different. And as I said, like they're still young. I do try to get it right. And again, that is also the immigrant piece is when you think about it in Indian culture at a relatively young age and in the past too young age, daughters would be married and often go very far away from their parents, right? So even though there can be these large beehives of family activity, it often doesn't involve the daughters, right? The daughters would often be married and off, and they'd have to go to wherever those in-laws were. And if they were close by, sure, but that wasn't always the case. In my mother's family, it was like that she came to the United States, then I moved to Los Angeles, then my kids moved different places. So there is something in there that there is we move around and again, the whole piece is that my children owe me nothing. They owe me absolutely nothing. They have no obligation to me. They just need to go out there and feel that they have always a safe nest to land in and to be themselves. And that to me is the core of parenting. There is no obligation. There is, and so when I do get time with them, I cherish it. They're very autonomous. They're very independent, but they're still always going to be my children, right? And I will always put their needs with some level of primacy. Does that make sense? That to me is that parenting is that, and that's the balancing act. Because you sometimes are like, oh, I haven't seen you in 3 months, and yet you're choosing to. We have normal reactions. I'm like, but I raised them to be able to make choices that work for them. And if they do choose to come spend time with me, it's from a place of want and not because of a place of guilt or not
Yes.
because of a place of overplaced obligation. I don't ever want that for them. And so
Yes.
that's a big one. And again, I try to listen, I try not to solve, but like I said, 20 minutes ago, I got it very wrong.
It is a work in progress. I mean, I so openly admit to my frailties and having written so many parenting books, I look back with regret too. I just tried to not get stuck there. But if I could I mean, so many mistakes. I go, how could I have gotten this so wrong? I think that's just the natural outcome of being sensitive, being self-critical, being overly perfectionistic. I think that's who we are, so we look back, but many people don't look back. So they're free of that rumination. So we take so much responsibility on ourselves. Just the last question, to the world, you look like you have your shit together, right? I mean, how the hell do you do it all? I mean, you are literally everywhere. And then we know you're an overworker, that's your trauma response, but you really do find a way to be authentic. You appear so authentic, so warm, so giving. So for women out there, what's something you would tell them is your
Yeah.
source? What wakes you up every morning and allows you to be this fire in the world?
I'm going to tell you what the research says, and I'm going to go into the Ramani of it all. People have asked me this question over and over again. I don't know how old your children are, Dr. Shefali, but everyone's like, are you sad about the empty nest? I'm like, folks, I'm having a party in the damn empty nest every night. I'd be loving me some empty nest. It is wonderful that I can eat cereal for dinner. It is wonderful that I can buy the dumbest groceries and not worry that I'm not getting this thing and this thing. It's liberation. I love the emptiness. Do I miss my kids? Of course I miss my kids. But I also, there's such joy in knowing if they're having a good day, I'm having a good day, wherever the heck their good day's happening. So the emptiness is a good thing. And I tried to be as hands-on as I could as a parent, and that made a career hard. I didn't have help. I didn't have carers and I didn't have family near me. So this was a solo run. And so having the time, like there would be once upon a time, someone's like, can you come to such and such place to speak? There are war battles that required less planning than I would to have to get to Washington, D.C. for 2 days. It was like, yeah, and there's a drive, and there's a concert, and there's a after school, blah, blah. I mean, now it's like, now the biggest problem is finding something to watch a cat.
Yeah.
So I have to say that there's a liberation that came from, because I had my kids pretty late. I had my kids at 34 and 37. So I was a late parent. And so I spent all those years in graduate school. Then I was an academic. And then as I went into this space where there was different demands on my time, I'm not having to do that day-to-day caregiving. I do go and care for my parents, but even then, I'm not like, they're not children, right? I just have to split my life between two coasts and then do the things I need to do when I'm in their home and that kind of thing. So it's more logistics, but there's research showing though that one of the things that can create real marital tension for people in their 50s is that many men who never had a career interruption because of children are settling into like that pre-retirement. And for many women, it's the first time they've actually been able to lean into their career in a significant way or take some leaps or jumps or try something new that they couldn't do before because they were handling so many child logistics. And that very much happened for me. And then I was kind of in a stale academic career. So then when we started doing this work on me writing and me speaking about and teaching about and all the 20 years of research I'd done on this, finally getting into the spaces it should have, my career had a renaissance quite late. In fact, my career actually kind of began quite late. Like I was well over 50, my kids were grown. And so part of it is that it's the embracing that this is a new phase. And I mean, when a person says I'm sad about the emptiness, I'm like, you are speaking a language I do not understand. Like
Right.
this is great. So that's one piece of it. And so now, Dr. Shefali, because there's a real blessing in coming into this when you're older, is that I'm enjoying the ride. And I'm very carefully watching women whose careers I admire in their mid to late 70s. And it's interesting because they're saying, and they're such wonderful mentors. So they'll say, take your body's still working. My hip's not great. And I'm perimenopausal and my cataracts. I'm like a car you probably should sell, but I can still get on a plane. And I think to myself, I didn't ever have this before. So when I'm in it, it's almost like this is a gift. This is really, I'm treasuring it because it's the first time. And so I was talking to a colleague I really admire. She's like 78, 79. She's like, because your body does give out, and this schedule's going to be tough at some point. So do this and enjoy it. And when you need to slow it, slow it. So I think in some ways I'm like a kid in a candy store. And so for women, women's bodies are made to live longer too. Embrace the stuff that comes as your kids get older. You actually can have a fascinating act 2 or act 3 when you're not in that heavy, like, what do I need to put in the lunchbox phase of life?
I know.
And really just say like, oh, I got my backpack. Like I don't mind, if I have to sleep in the airport part of the night, I don't care. So it's like, I get to be the backpacker, but now I'm like, 60 years old. So it's and so I got a little bit more money in my pocket too. So it's good. I think that there's a recognizing the blessing that this came when it did. So I'm able to appreciate it.
Yeah.
That's what's been a big driver.
Yeah. Well, you're certainly a role model for all of us because you're living it. You speak with such integrity. When I listen to you, I'm hearing the message way more than I'm hearing you. And that's really a compliment. What that means is that you're so passionate about the message and your ego doesn't show up. You're a true teacher.
I appreciate that. But I will say this too, the other message for women, because I came into this later and older, I do not sweat small stuff that really brings women down. Folks, I try to put my face on, and I think this blow dry is from Wednesday, to be honest with you. I've gained weight. I'm in this from here and here. And yeah, no, I'm wearing double digit sizes and no, and you become invisible at a certain age. And ladies, the day you become invisible in the world is a freaking superpower, because I think that's where it is all intellect for me now, which is really where I'm most comfortable. And so I stopped caring about that stuff. Like I throw on what I throw on. I'm joking not, like I look ridiculous from the waist down. Those things matter to me a lot once upon a time. They don't matter. My house looks kind of like a moderately deranged person lives in it, and there's things where they shouldn't be. And so a lot of that perfectionistic bent I had earlier in life to be the perfect daughter, to be the perfect this, that's all gone. Like the jig is up, folks. Things are messy and weird things get eaten for dinner. And, I still wear a backpack. I'll never forget the day I was about 42 years old and I tried to carry a purse. I'm like, I don't get this. Like, this is on one shoulder. And I remember I was at a dinner, at a work dinner in Washington, D.C. And one of my colleagues is like, you look ridiculous. Like, that's a student's backpack. And I was like, I don't care what you think. This thing is comfortable on my back, and I got a little holder for my water bottle. Like, I don't care what people think about me, about my JanSport backpack, about my Crocs. And so I said, but I have something to say. And if this has happened to you, you're going to want to listen to what I have to say. But all that went away. And so there's a real kind of like, yeah, kind of whole crazy cat lady vibe that I'm channeling through the world. And it's so much easier because it's actually who I am.
Well, let me tell you, as a woman watching you, I'm just in awe. So, whatever you're doing is so true. So, I want to be that. I want to give myself the permission to really just speak my truth without caring too much. But you do look like you're pretty put together. I'm just telling you. I mean, I don't know how you do it, but you do it. Let me ask you one curious question that I have. I'm curious about this. My turning point was when Oprah picked up my book and I got to go on her Super Soul. What was your turning point? Because it seems like, even though you did decades of work, you blew up at the right time when the world was ready to hear it. What was that first moment where you went, oh my God, this is getting recognition like it's never gotten before?
I think the moment was when we had started a YouTube channel. And I just said, well, there's a lot to say here, so let's just keep doing. We didn't know what the hell we were doing. I still work with members of the team who I'm like, okay, let's try. And then during the pandemic, obviously people were flocking to spaces. I mean, the pandemic start for us ended up being a bit fortuitous, but there was no person, there was no moment like a single human being recognized it. But I was looking at the numbers and I was like, some people are watching this. This wasn't just, this is making a difference. And then what was happening was I was seeing a slow shift in the cultural conversation. I can't say I can take responsibility for that, but something happened. And I think that there was some level of like, wait, this narcissism stuff is percolating into the world. And I think that was the moment when I started looking at those numbers on YouTube. And I don't really look at them that closely. I just keep churning content into there because my singular mission and vision is I want to make sure that there's a free way for people can get this information. Most people are never going to end up in a therapist's office. Some people don't even have the money for a book or a membership, but everybody can go to YouTube other than a few regions of the world. And so I thought, we keep pushing it here. And I remember one woman saying we go to, in India, actually, the president of India who said, we didn't have strong internet in the house, but there are these cafes we could go to. And we would go and we'd put our money together into the internet cafe to watch your YouTube videos. And that conversation I had with some women, and I thought, that's it. We hit our goal, that this is now getting into the hands of the people out there who ordinarily wouldn't see this. Then that's when I knew that we had done what we set ourselves out to do, is that people I didn't think ever could be reached were now being reached. And I was like, okay, we got it.
I know this sounds like I'm just like another person fangirling on you, but I just want to say sincerely, I have watched you on Med Circle. I've taken notes. You're like this professor out there giving free classes. You've been giving classes to us women, and you have helped so many women, me included, to identify the unhealthy relationships, the techniques, but you've given it so freely and volumes of information. I mean, you have video upon video upon video. And I just want to say thank you from all our behalf for forging this path, for helping us get out of narcissistic relationships, having a language, identifying. We all knew something was wrong, but we didn't have the words.
Look, you had the words. Yep.
You gave us the words.
That's all I ever wanted. So many women have, and we see this in all the communities we work in. There is no more glorious moment when a survivor, for the first time, sees themselves in the world as themselves, and not someone who's constantly running interference against this person who's harming them, and sees the possibility of themselves in the world. And I've seen this happen in survivors through art they've created and poetry that they've written and songs that they've written and books that they're writing. And I mean, some are going back to school and training as therapists. Some are just going back to school for the first time. It's quite remarkable. And when I stop and really think of how much human potential got stolen by toxic relationships, it actually makes me sick to my stomach. And if even a handful of people can come out, the winner on this is the world, because we then get those discoveries and that wisdom and all of that. And so that is why we've got to give, power to the voices that are often silenced in the name of all this toxic nonsense. It's getting harder, but I still think we're just going to have to keep doing it. And that young women also hear this, because I think more and more young women are getting this, and maybe it's going to protect them from getting into relationships that aren't good for them. But listen, I've known 78-year-olds to go back and get their PhDs. I've talked to 82-year-old women who are filing for divorce. I mean, I'm seeing this on all ages. And so for women to find that voice and to recognize that there's many acts in a woman's life, we can get very stuck into one narrative. And that the different acts, like for me, like I said, this empty nest, I can actually move around the world a little bit now. That was unfathomable to me when I had young children. And it's not easy now, but it's a revelation. So thank you.
Oh my goodness. And Dana, that's how your work and my work are so interfaced, because this is how we grew up, to be silenced, to be submissive. And that's how we enter these narcissistic relationships, because we were taught that. So we're going to talk about that more on your podcast. But thank you so much for being here. Tell everybody about your amazing membership programs.
Absolutely. So we've got two membership programs. We've got the Dr. Ramani Network, and the Dr. Ramani Network. So first of all, folks, the great thing about that membership is think podcast, but zero ads, number one. But also what's so great about it is that not only do you get to hear from a whole variety of expert guests, we've had Mel Robbins on, we've had Matt Hussey on, I mean, we've had Christine Cocciola, we have Dr. Shefali on, but there's also weeks where people in the Dr. Ramani Network can come up on screen like you and I, and ask their questions too. And that's its own teaching moment. Not everyone does it that way. Some people submit their questions and I answer them, but it's a very interactive space where we can talk to each other, where I give many lessons on how to navigate these relationships. That's one. The second is our healing program for survivors of narcissistic relationships. Now, this is a deeper dive. So people are like, okay, this Dr. Ramani Network is great. I'm getting a lot of information from that, but I really want to focus on specific elements of healing. That's where our healing program's great. Every month, you get a 90-minute workshop, you get a 90-minute Q&A session, you get a texting Q&A session, you get a guided meditation. There's like 12, 13 journal prompts a month. So if you're doing all the work of that program, it's very robust. Every month we have a different topic in the program. We're 3 years in, we have an amazing community, and we have a secure community platform that really acts as a tremendous support space, which we monitor to make sure that nothing untoward is happening there. And then I tell folks, like some people say, I don't know if I can swing either of those financially, or I don't want to make that commitment. YouTube every day, we have new content. But I would suggest that you check out our programs, because if you are going through a narcissistic relationship, come see. You might find that the discourse, the conversation, and the lessons are things that are opening your eyes in a way. And also, especially in healing program, it's a chance for you to really lean into your story by doing the journaling and the other activities we do together in that program. And then, if you go to our website, we also have live events from time to time and all of that. So all of that's there. So we have levels and levels of different ways that people can do this. And of course, my book, It's Not You, is available. And I have other books on the topic. And that can also round out some of your healing journey.
I don't know a single woman literally who has not read your book or doesn't own it.
Thank you.
So the book is It's Not You. Everyone should read it just to help themselves, but help others who are caught up in such relationships. Dr. Ramani, thank you for everything you do. It's an understatement to say that you have changed people's lives, but you certainly changed mine. So thank you again.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shefali. It's always such a pleasure to see you.
For everyone who's read Dr. Ramani's books or have heard about her, I'm sure you've learned so much from this conversation. I know I have. And don't forget to check out her best-selling book, It's Not You, and her two amazing membership programs. They are the Dr. Ramani Network, which is full of amazing information that you can use in your daily relationships, and the incredible healing program, which is for survivors of narcissistic relationships. Check out both of them on her website and get all the information there. Thank you again for listening, and I will see you on the next episode of Parenting and You with me, Dr. Shefali. Parenting and You with Dr. Shefali is for educational and informational purposes only. It is not intended as a substitute for professional medical, psychological, psychotherapeutic, coaching, healthcare, or other qualified professional advice, diagnosis, or treatment.